When President Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine, he provoked global outrage. But some countries have refused to condemn the offensive, and a few have even supported it.
The result of the vote is as follows.
In early March 2022, world leaders voted on a UN resolution to demand the end of the war in Ukraine. 141 countries voted in favour, but 5 voted against the move and 35 abstained. The 5 countries who voted against the motion, essentially supporting Russia, were Belarus, Syria, North Korea, Eritrea and Russia itself. Belarus is a major ally of Putin's in the region, with President Alexander Lukashenko backing him from the start. Russia propped up Syria's Assad regime in its civil war and still has forces there. And North Korea and Eritrea are both ruled by anti-American dictatorships, so were unwilling to support any pro-Western motion. Russia's also historically opposed Western sanctions in Eritrea. China and Russia say they want to lead a new world order.
中俄合作无上限，我们争取和平无上限，维护安全无上限，反对霸权无上限。
But the Ukraine conflict is testing that relationship. China is caught between supporting an ally and its long-standing rule that one country should not interfere in the internal affairs of another. It says Russia's security concerns are legitimate and refuses to condemn the invasion, but it also abstained in that UN vote.
我们一贯主张，对华谈判是解决乌克兰危机的唯一正确途径。
China's also scrutinizing what happens in Ukraine for reasons closer to home. It wants to seize the island of Taiwan and sees Ukraine as a test of Western resolve in a possible precursor to what might happen in the East.
妥善地处理两岸关系，避免真的走上类似于乌克兰这样的有可能的这样的一个情形。
India also abstained in the UN vote. Russia and India have a close history. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Putin have kept that up. India relies on Russian military supplies, but the war has also put India in a bind. It sees both Russia and the US as key allies. India has tried to stay neutral about the Ukraine invasion, calling for sovereignty to be respected, but also for Russia's security concerns to be addressed. But since the UN vote, there have been signs that India is becoming more supportive of Ukraine, sending humanitarian aid, and Prime Minister Modi making a number of calls to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Of the 35 abstainers in that UN vote, 17 came from Africa. Many have just wanted to stay neutral, but others have openly supported Russia. Countries like the Central African Republic and Mali have close ties with Russia, with Russian mercenaries helping their respective governments fight insurgents. South Africa has refused to condemn the invasion, with President Cyril Ramaphosa criticising NATO over the conflict. The son of Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni even tweeted that the majority of mankind that are non-white support Russia's stand in Ukraine. The legacy of the Cold War is also playing a role. Russia supported other movements that overthrew Western-backed governments in countries like Algeria, Mozambique and Zimbabwe, and it's built infrastructure and provided aid and military equipment. That soft power approach could now be paying off. When Putin invaded Ukraine, it was widely thought he sought to undermine NATO and the West. But ironically, it's done the opposite, uniting Europe and forcing even famously neutral countries like Switzerland to take a stand. President Putin may have hoped that this invasion would forge a new world order. He may have won some support from old allies, but the final outcome of this conflict could be Russia emerging as a vassal state of China, and the West appearing stronger than many had expected.
The Ukrainian armed forces have regained control of 11 settlements in the Kherson region. According to Ukrinform, the grouping of troops south said this in a statement posted on Facebook. Due to the efforts of our defenders from the 60th Separate Motor Rifle Brigade, which is part of the grouping of troops south, the following settlements in the Kherson region have been liberated: Novovorontsovka, Mala Shesternia, Novohrihorivka, Topoline, Nyazivka, Krasnivka, Svobodin, Kamianka, Prihiria, Kochabivka, Orlov, the statement said. Thanks to the military of the 60th Separate Motor Rifle Brigade, the local population today can receive humanitarian aid, medicines and food. In turn, the inhabitants of the liberated territories support and encourage Ukrainian defenders. Conducting operations to liberate these settlements, a unit of the 60th Separate Motor Rifle Brigade captured enemy equipment, T-64 tanks, with full ammunition, BMP-2, BMD-2, ZU-2M based on MTLB, the statement said.
European Union officials in Brussels are meeting virtually with Chinese leaders for their first summit in 2 years. High on the agenda is Beijing's perceived neutrality over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. EU leaders are likely to seek assurances that China won't agree to Russia's request for arms supplies and won't help Moscow evade Western economic sanctions. Well, let's get more from our DW correspondent, Barbara Weser, in Brussels. Barbara, this meeting has been going on. Were there any indications as to which side Beijing supports at today's EU-China summit? Any tendency you could make out?
I mean, we heard from Chinese diplomats after the meeting with the Chinese Prime Minister. At the moment, the meeting with President Xi himself is underway. And what they said was, yeah, China doesn't want to be forced to pick sides. So they don't want to come down on either side, and they don't want to be really disturbed or questioned about their strategic relationship with Russia. So that was a given. It was quite clear from the beginning of this summit, this virtual summit, that of course there was no prizing away of Russia from the Chinese embrace. That would continue. It's just a question of how tight it is. Now, of course, China is trying to sort of play both ends against the middle here, or if you will, ride the tiger, because on one hand they want to still continue the closeness with and the support for President Putin. On the other hand, they do need their biggest trade partner, the European Union. This is where their economic growth is made and created and supported. So they can't afford a real trade war, for instance, or sanctions, or a real problems with the EU. And this is what China is trying to balance carefully and sort of hiding itself under a lot of diplomatic verbiage.
Britain and its allies have agreed to send more lethal military aid to Ukraine to help defend it against Russia's invasion. There will be more lethal aid going into Ukraine as a result of today. A number of countries have come forward either with new ideas or indeed more pledges of money, Wallace told reporters after hosting over 35 international partners at the Second International Defense Donor Conference for Ukraine. The aid will include the provision of air and coastal defense systems, longer-range artillery and counter-battery capabilities, armored vehicles, as well as wider training and logistical support. Today's donor conference demonstrates the international community's determination to support Ukraine in the face of President Putin's illegal and unprovoked invasion by Russian forces, Wallace said in a later statement. As reported, a large-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine has been ongoing since February 24. The invaders have been destroying infrastructure and massively shelling residential areas, killing Ukrainian civilians, using artillery, rockets, and ballistic missiles, as well as dropping bombs.